Chris, does God cause, you've mentioned that He's decreed all things, that He's caused all things. By way of clarification, does that mean that does God cause, and is He the author of sin and temptation? Pretty simple. Does God cause, and is He the author of sin and temptation? Question number 2. If all things are decreed, and if God has foreordained that all things happen, and He causes all things, why do we pray? What's the purpose of prayer, and what is the purpose of intercession? Okay, now, unless I'm mistaken, I think I know how Chris is going to answer this. Unless he comes up with something that he might surprise me on this, but I'll just say this. The majority of Calvinists, I need to clarify this question, okay? Narrow it down a little bit. The majority of Calvinists will say that God not only ordains and decrees the ends, but He also decrees and ordains the means by which we get there. So God commands us to pray. That's why we pray. We pray because God commands us, and we pray because God has decreed that we would do that also. Okay, I hear what you're saying there. But the question is this: why? Why? Why pray? None of our prayers will ever change anything, will they? Or will they? Maybe you can just elaborate on that. If all things are decreed and set in stone, why do we pray? What's the purpose of prayer, and what good does it really do? Okay, that's the second question. Question number 3. This is more of this question comes out of more pastoral ramifications. We've been talking about this philosophically and ideas. These ideas are often removed, but having pastored in the past and having counseled people quite a bit over the years, there are some pastoral ramifications of this that really are a burden to me. And what that is this: there is the situation that arises, and tragically, it does arise. This is a truth that we deal with today, where people are dealing with struggles in life by way of how are you going to counsel the grieving mother who comes, her child, her daughter has been kidnapped, raped, and brutally murdered. It's the position of the If the position of the Calvinist is that that was God's decree, that God decreed that, and that that was His will for that child's life, my question is, how will you counsel the grieving mother? It's a practical pastoral question. Thirdly, the third question would be this: if it is, and by the way, this might not have to do directly with the sovereignty, but it interacts with it a bit. We've talked about God's hardening people's hearts, so that's how it interacts with this debate of sovereignty. And what that is this: according to the Calvinistic position, nobody can choose God in and of themselves. That's something that we don't have the ability to do. The extent of total depravity is such that we are dead in our trespasses and sins. We don't have the ability to say yes to God, to respond to the gospel in and of ourselves. Okay? So, what needs to be done according to the Calvinistic position is that regeneration needs to happen first. First, there's regeneration. First, a person is born again, then there's faith. So there's the maxim of Calvinism. Regeneration precedes faith. By the way, if you ever wonder if a person is a Calvinist or Arminian, side note, that's the difference right there. What does a person believe happens first? What happens first? Is a person born again, and then they have faith? Or does a person have faith, and as a result of that, then they're born again? Because that's going to determine where a person's at. The Calvinist says that a person's born again, and then they have faith. So, according to the Calvinistic position, a person cannot choose God on their own. If that's the case, my question is this: why does God have to harden people's hearts? As it says, this is a passage that was brought up, John chapter 12, verse 39. He hardened their hearts so that they wouldn't believe. Well, if they couldn't believe unless there be divine intervention, my question is this: why is it that God needed to harden their hearts? Interesting question. I like that one. That's a good question. Okay. The third one comes by way of Rick Gervais, the comedian. Ricky Gervais. He's a comedian, and he's an atheist, outspoken atheist. He's a kind of an obnoxious atheist at times. Okay, but you know what? Here's the deal. He grew up in the church, and the understanding that he has of God is this Calvinistic model. And that whole model, by the way, if you watch the movie, I haven't watched the whole thing, I've only watched parts of it. It's the movie Liar, Liar that he created. And it's a mockery of God. He's mocking God in the thing. But the idea that he's mocking is the Calvinistic model of God, because the reality of the matter is that the whole understanding, it's easy to mock. It is. It's an easy thing to mock. And he says this. He has an interesting question, and he says it in a joking way because he's a comedian, but he's dead serious. And he is. He's serious about this. He says this: assuming that God is in control and causing all things, assuming that God causes all things, he says this. By the way, he says, I'm an atheist, but if God is real, why did he make me an atheist? Man, that's a poignant question right there. If God is real, why did he make me an atheist? I don't have to struggle with that question because I don't think God made him an atheist. But it's a question that I pass on to Chris. Chris, if God is sovereign in the way that you depict him, why did he make Rick an atheist? Why did he make anybody an atheist? So those are my 5 questions. Look forward to your response.